Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Big news from Microsoft and xAI today that actually impinges on OpenAI as well and could actually spell OpenAI's doom. So this is an interview, a very, very brief one, and I'm going to just pull out little sections of it between Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, and of course Elon Musk, who is the CEO of xAI as well as X, as well as Tesla, etc. Anyway, the two of them make a huge announcement about GROK being hosted on Microsoft Azure. This is a really big deal because Microsoft, of course, started with OpenAI. In fact, they invested a ton of money into them. And over the past year or so, they have obviously had second thoughts about that. And of course, that brings along substantial consequences to OpenAI that we can discuss a little bit later. But anyway, Microsoft is obviously expanding the range of artificial intelligence models that they are hosting. And the latest one is GROK. And that's a really, really big catch. So I wanted to talk through this interview. So we'll start with the announcement itself, which starts around 53 seconds. Of course, I will leave a link to this in the description. This is actually reposted by Elon Musk himself.
And so it's fantastic to have you at our developer conference. Obviously, the exciting thing for us is to be able to launch GROK on Azure. I know you have a deep vision for what AI needs to be, and that's what got you to get this built. It's a family of models that are both response and reasoning models, and you have a very exciting roadmap. You want to just tell us a little bit about sort of your vision, the capability. You're pushing on both capability and efficiency, so maybe you can just talk about a little bit of that.
So like I said, this is a huge announcement. Number one, this is a huge feather in the cap for xAI and GROK because Microsoft taking them seriously enough to host them on Azure means that they feel like they're a frontier model that is on the order of the best models from OpenAI, etc. So that is a really, really huge announcement in its own right. Elon Musk is going to go on to talk about GROK 3.5, which is the unreleased version of GROK that is coming out soon. He really, really reiterates the fact that it is physics-based. In fact, most of the rest of the interview is actually Elon Musk talking about how physics is the grounding for GROK 3.5. Really interesting to me as a former physics major. My undergraduate degree, of course, is in physics, and that has given me a perspective on reality that everything is based on physics ultimately, which really it is, because chemistry is based on physics and biology is based on chemistry, and psychology and free will and sociology and all of those other things are based on those things that come beneath them. So at the bottom layer is physics, and physics, as Elon Musk will go on to say later on here, is the law. Everything else is more or less a recommendation. So he's really going to press on this, and this also has a consequence. And this feeling is obviously not only brought about from xAI and from training GROK and everything, but also from years of Tesla working with full self-driving with their vehicles, and now with Optimus, the humanoid robot. If you haven't caught my latest video with Scott about Optimus dancing, the reinforcement learning, the physics engine, all of that kind of stuff, definitely check it out up here, and I will also leave it at the end of this video. It's well worth the watch, but in general, consider all of the experience that Tesla has had with full self-driving and now with Optimus as you listen to how Elon Musk responds to Satya's questions.
With GROK, especially with GROK 3.5, that is about
both capability and efficiency. So maybe you can just talk about a little bit of that.
Sure. So yeah, with GROK, especially with GROK 3.5 that is about to be released, it's trying to reason from first principles. So apply kind of the tools of physics to thinking. If you're trying to get to fundamental truths, you boil things down to the axiomatic elements that are most likely to be correct, and then you reason up from there, and then you can test your conclusions against those axiomatic elements. And in physics, if you violate conservation of energy or momentum, then you're either going to get a Nobel Prize or you're wrong, and you're almost certainly wrong, basically. So that's really the focus of GROK 3.5 is sort of fundamentals of physics and applying physics tools across all lines of reasoning, and to aspire to truth with minimal error. Like, there's always going to be some mistakes that are made, but we aim to get to truth with acknowledged error, but minimize that error over time. And I think that's actually extremely important for AI safety. So I've thought for a long time about AI safety, and my ultimate conclusion is the old maxim that honesty is the best policy. It really is for safety. But I do want to emphasize, we we have and will make mistakes, but we aspire to correct them very quickly. And we are very much looking forward to feedback from the developer community to say, like, what do you need? Where are we wrong? How can we make it better? And to have GROK be something that the developer community is very excited to use, and where they can feel that their feedback is being heard, and GROK is improving and serving their need.
So a lot to break down in Elon's answer here. Number one, of course, is that GROK 3.5 is coming and probably coming soon. More importantly is that he says they're using the laws of physics as a grounding. And reality, of course, is a great ground truth. And interestingly enough, this actually, kind of dovetails with Jan LeCun, who is very much of the opinion that large language models being trained on text only will never gain, the kind of intelligence or consciousness or whatever you want to call it, to become highly intelligent, because they're basing their version of reality on something that's already abstracted, which is language. Whereas if you base your version of reality on physics or a really good simulation of physics, and this is something that we saw Optimus working with, reinforcement learning, zero shot to get to be able to dance and things like that, full self-driving, Tesla's full self-driving, the same thing. So you could see the potential for this to feed into xAI's GROK, that they could be feeding into it, not just language, but also learnings from physics, potentially a physics simulation engine. That would be very, very unique for a large language model. That would be very different than the way the other ones have been trained so far. And that really produces an interesting possibility. Again, we'll have to wait for GROK 3.5 to actually come out to know whether this is for sure. But Elon has just, he was over and over again talking about physics, how physics is the ground truth, how GROK 3.5 was trained on physics, how important it is, how it's trying to be as accurate as possible, how it's trying to minimize its errors. And then, of course, he finishes up with the need for developer feedback, and they're taking the developer feedback in. So this all creates a really, really interesting dynamic. And it's quite possible, of course, that Microsoft, in fact, it's very probable that Microsoft has seen GROK 3.5 in whatever state it's in already. And that's part of the reason for the decision that they made to host GROK on Azure. And now we get into the physics of intelligence at scale.
It's in some sense, cracking the physics of intelligence is perhaps the real goal for us to be able to use AI at scale. And so it's so good to take that first principles approach that you and your team are taking. And also you're deploying this. I mean, one of the things about sort of what you do is you're doing, unsupervised FSD on one side, you're doing robotics, of course there's GROK, so you're deploying GROK across all of your businesses from SpaceX to Tesla, obviously at X.
So you can hear Satya here discussing the physics of intelligence. He's a very intelligent man. He can obviously see how Tesla and xAI have begun to marry together the intelligence of the real world with large language models. Again, we don't know this for absolutely sure yet, but it seems highly likely this is the case. And Satya is sort of tipping his hat towards this and saying this is what's going to happen. So my prediction here is that we're going to see GROK 3.5 be trained on a different data set than the other data sets that are out there. It's going to have some physics simulation, some physics-based data that it's going to be trained on. And Satya was basically just kind of discussing that, as was Elon Musk. So it's not like it's a big secret here. They pretty much told us what they're working on. They've alluded very strongly to what the GROK team has been working on over at xAI, and it's very, very exciting, actually. And then we get into Microsoft being more agnostic about AI models. In other words, they just want to host different models. They want to orchestrate them, which is a very, very different way of thinking than they were saying a year or two ago when they were fully in bed with OpenAI, and OpenAI was driving their artificial intelligence policy. Now it sounds like what they want to do is they kind of want to sit above and orchestrate these different models as they wish. And that is a cool position for Microsoft to take. It's something that I wish Apple would have done a long time ago. They really, really are desperately in need of doing something like this. But clearly Microsoft is taking the lead on this front, and they're working in a very clever way. They're not developing their own models or anything. What they're doing is creating an ecosystem in which many different AI models can work. And then Elon responds to this about how in order to be really intelligent, an AI model, just like a human, has to be in line with physics.
One of the themes for this developer conference, Elon, is we're building pretty sophisticated AI apps, right? It's not even about any one model. It's about orchestrating multiple models, multiple agents, just anything that you're seeing in the real world application side, even inside of your own companies. When you think about even a Tesla or a SpaceX, where you put GROK and the other AI models you're building.
Yeah, incredibly important for an AI model to be grounded in reality. Reality, I was saying, which is like physics is the law and everything else is a recommendation. Which is, I'm not suggesting people break the laws made by humans. We should generally obey the laws of humans, but I've seen many people break human-made laws, but I have not seen anyone break the laws of physics. So for any given AI, grounding it against reality, and reality, for example, as you mentioned, with the car, it needs to drive safely and correctly. The humanoid robot Optimus needs to perform the task that it's being asked to perform. These are things that are very, very helpful for ensuring that the model is truthful and accurate, because it has to adhere to the laws of physics. So I think that's actually maybe somewhat overlooked, or at least not talked about enough, is that to really be intelligent, it's got to make predictions that are in line with reality, in other words, physics. It's a really fundamental thing, and being able to ground that with cars and robots is very important.
So again, we're cycling around this same thing, the grounding in physics. In order to be intelligent, something has to be in line with physics. That makes sense. My tests with a lot of large language models involving the flipping the cup upside down with the olive in it and removing it and everything, and the large language models just making basic mistakes because they don't have an understanding of physics. In other words, saying the table would be dry and the olive would stay in the glass, things like that, which don't make any sense to a human being because, of course, we're like, well, I've seen it. I know exactly what will happen if something like that occurs. So anyway, he's talking about that intelligence, but he also then goes back around to full self-driving and Optimus. And my feeling here is that we've got a very, very strong and growing connection between xAI and Tesla, and Tesla's full self-driving team is potentially giving some information, some help with training, some protocols, things like that to xAI, and in return, xAI is probably going to deliver GROK on full self-driving. We'll probably, hopefully relatively shortly, but we will have, and maybe it'll be at the Cybercab event coming up in June, not event, but anyway, maybe there will be an event, but anyway, when these Cybercabs begin to actually drive around the streets of Austin, Texas, it is possible that GROK might be integrated in there as a way for the people to communicate with it, to say, hey, you're driving too fast, or you're driving too slow, or can you change my destination to the Whole Foods instead of to the wherever, the Trader Joe's I was going to go or something, right? So there is a possibility there will be a voice interface coming up at that point, and that's a way for xAI to feed back into Tesla, and Tesla has been giving xAI means to train GROK 3.5 on things that are more physics-based. That seems to be what's going on here. And then Elon mentions that GROK is already being used in customer service at SpaceX and Tesla, which is a really interesting little tidbit here.
So I think in terms of improving the quality of customer service and sort of issue resolution, AI is already, GROK is already doing quite a good job of that at SpaceX and Tesla. And we look forward to offering that to other companies.
So that's a really fascinating insight that GROK is already being used at SpaceX and Tesla. Kind of makes me want to call or text to Tesla or SpaceX and see if I can get GROK on the phone or on a text message or something like that and see if it's actually the agent that is responding to me. And it's quite possible in the most recent conversation I've had with Starlink customer support, because my router actually went bad for my Starlink dish, and it was taken care of very, very quickly and efficiently by, I don't know. I thought it was a human at the time. I had no reason to suspect otherwise, but it's quite possible it was actually GROK 3 or 3.5 or something that was actually operating as a customer service representative. So really fascinating that GROK is already being used in a real world scenario, and that Elon is discussing licensing this to other companies. That is also huge news. And also, again, back to OpenAI, a really big competitive jab at OpenAI, because of course they've got products that they're selling into that retail customer support space as well. So this could be a really big shot across the bow for OpenAI, as well as the announcement from Microsoft that GROK is going to be hosted on Azure. And then finally, we get to the journey ahead, the coalescing of LLMs with vision and other models. So let's take a listen to the last little part here.
And then looking forward to even how they deploy. There's these language models. There's, I think over time we will have this coming together of language models with vision, with action. But to your point, being really grounded on a real world model. And that I think is ultimately the goal here. And so thank you.
So again, Satya is kind of giving this away. Both of them are kind of giving away the game here. He's talking about how large language models and vision and other models will come together. In my mind, there's clearly a tip of the hat that GROK 3.5 and maybe GROK 4 are going to start to integrate these models more and more tightly together. Now, it's not like xAI is the first company to have done this, but they might do it in a very unique way if they actually have physics-based information that they're passing into this large, what do you want to call it? Large multimodal model. At this point, it's an LMM instead of an LLM. But if they are able to use real physical simulations like cars driving and robots walking around in the real world, and of course simulations, because of course Tesla has basically told us with the reinforcement learning with zero shot into reality that they have an amazing physics simulator that they're working well with as well. So you've got this combination of real world information plus an incredibly accurate physics simulation potentially coming together here in GROK 3.5 and future releases. And Microsoft clearly is excited about this enough that they are pulling this into the Microsoft Azure cloud environment as one of the models that people will be able to use. That's very exciting for us as customers to be able to have access to more different models on Azure. And of course, it's extremely exciting for xAI and therefore X and Tesla, SpaceX, etc. It's pretty amazing news that they have been able to make this partnership. And again, I think it's really bad news for OpenAI. They had a reel in a lot of financial support from Microsoft, and that seems to be evaporating at this point. And all of these artificial intelligence companies need tons of money right now to build out these data centers, to train these frontier models. And most of the other companies right now, Google has a lot of money, xAI has a lot of money, Microsoft has a lot of money, and even Meta with their Llama models has a lot of money. But OpenAI does not have access to nearly the kind of deep pockets that other companies like these have. And they could easily fall by the wayside in the next year or two if they're just starved of cash and they can't train these new frontier models and they fall behind. They're going to become less and less relevant. So that's what I've got, folks. What do you think about this announcement? Do you think I'm correct that xAI has been training GROK 3.5 on actual physical, real world information plus highly accurate physics simulations? And do you think that OpenAI is in deep trouble, or do you think they're going to be able to attract the kind of cash they need to be able to survive and thrive long term? Let me know in the comments. And while you're down there, if you don't mind liking and subscribing, it really helps out the channel. Thank you all so much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.